The sun dipped low behind the waterlogged rooftops of the sunken village, casting long shadows across the skeletal remains of what had once been a bustling heart of life and faith. Clara Mallory stood at the edge of the flooded square, the chill of the evening air wrapping around her like a shroud. Her breath rose in shallow clouds, mingling with the thick mist that curled lazily over the water's surface. The village was silent, except for the soft lapping of water against broken stone and the distant call of a lone bird, its cry sharp and haunting in the fading light. As Clara's gaze swept over the submerged structures, she felt that familiar, unsettling pull, a whisper of something watching, something waiting beneath the surface. Her fingers tightened around the leather-bound journal she carried, its pages filled with notes, sketches, and fragments of a history steeped in tragedy and shadow. It was here, in this place suspended between past and present, that her own past collided with the village's dark legacy. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. There, shimmering just beyond the water's edge, was the faint outline of a small figure. Clara's heart skipped a beat. The figure danced lightly on the water's surface, laughter ringing out like the tinkling of distant bells. It was a girl, no more than 8 or 9, her hair a dark halo glowing softly in the dying light. The apparition's eyes met Clara's, wide and filled with both innocence and sorrow, before the figure began to fade, dissolving into the mist as if swallowed by the very air itself. "Tommy," Clara whispered, the name catching in her throat. The vision vanished, but the echo of that laughter lingered, mingling with the rising unease that had settled deep within her bones since the village had resurfaced. Back at her makeshift camp, Clara pored over the worn pages of her journal. Each entry was a thread, weaving together the fragments of the village's story and her own tangled memories. Tommy's face haunted the margins, smiling, carefree, forever lost beneath cold, unforgiving waters. The mysterious drowning that had claimed her sister years ago was the wound that drove Clara's relentless pursuit of truth. She had always sensed that Tommy's fate was entwined with the curse that doomed this village, but until now, the connection had been elusive, like shadows just beyond the reach of light. That night, sleep was a fragile thing. Clara's dreams were invaded by visions both beautiful and terrifying. She found herself wandering the flooded streets, the church's silhouette looming against a sky heavy with storm clouds. In the sanctuary, where water pooled over cracked tiles and broken pews, the apparition of a girl appeared again, this time nearer, a translucent figure drenched in sorrow. Tears, glimmering like droplets of liquid crystal, trailed down her cheeks as she reached out silently toward Clara. "Tommy," Clara breathed, stepping closer, her fingers trembling as if to touch a fragile wisp of smoke. But the girl faded once more, leaving Clara alone in the cold, echoing silence. Days passed, each one blurring into the next as Clara wrestled with the visions and the creeping sense of despair that clung to the village like a second skin. She sought out Elias Harrow, hoping that the grizzled fisherman might offer some clarity. Elias, with his weather-beaten face and wary eyes, listened gravely as Clara recounted her experiences. "Lost souls don't rest easy here," Elias said, his voice rough as the sea, "and neither do the living who carry their burdens." He spoke of the villagers' pact, the rituals that had bound them to the church, and the curse that had swallowed them whole. But it was Clara's own torment that Elias recognized most clearly, the unresolved grief that made her vulnerable to the spirit's restless reach. One evening, as a cold rain began to fall, Clara sat beside a small fire. The flames flickered and danced, casting shadows that seemed to twist and writhe like living things. Clutching a faded photograph of Tommy, Clara's mind was a tempest of memories and emotions. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into the faint outline of Tommy's face, whispering a name that echoed with desperate longing. The fire hissed and sputtered as Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Why won't you let me go?" she murmured, tears mingling with the rain. The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, but the question lingered in the damp night air. The next day, Clara ventured deeper into the village, drawn to the flooded church that had become the epicenter of the curse's power. As she crossed the threshold, the water rose around her ankles, cold and unyielding. Her flashlight beam swept across the altar, submerged but intact, and then caught a movement out of the corner of her eye. A flashback surged forward, sharp, vivid, and unrelenting. Clara was there, on the riverbank where Tommy had drowned. The water had been deceptively calm, masking the hidden currents that pulled her sister under. Clara's screams echoed in her mind, mingling with the silence that followed. The memory was a wound reopened, raw and bleeding. Shaking, Clara sank to her knees, the water swirling coldly around her. She reached out with trembling hands, as if to grasp the past and lay it to rest. But the curse was not so easily broken. A voice whispered in the darkness, soft, chilling, and filled with ancient sorrow. "You cannot save her yet." Clara's eyes snapped open. The church was silent once more, save for the drip of water from the cracked ceiling. Her heart pounded, but somewhere beneath the fear, a fragile ember of hope flickered. She knew now that breaking the curse would mean confronting not only the restless spirits of the drowned village, but also the shadows within her own soul. Tommy's death was not a tragedy apart from the village's fate. It was entwined with it, a key to salvation or destruction. With renewed determination, Clara rose from the water, the weight of grief and dread pressing upon her but no longer crushing her spirit. The village's secrets whispered around her, a dark symphony of faith, fear, and the relentless pull of the water. The past was not dead. It was rising once more, and Clara was caught in its tide. As the night deepened, the village held its breath, waiting, watching. And somewhere beneath the waves, the curse stirred, its ancient hunger awakening with the promise of another cycle. Clara's journey was far from over. The visions of Tommy were a haunting melody that would guide her through the darkness ahead, or doom her to be lost beneath the waves forever. The church bells tolled faintly, a ghostly reminder that some prayers are never answered and some sins never forgiven. The cabin smelled of brine and aged timber, the walls lined with fishing nets and faded photographs that spoke of a quieter life before the curse. Clara sat opposite Elia's harrow, whose weathered hands trembled slightly as he closed the battered leather journal with a sigh. "You deserve to know the truth," Elia said, his voice rough like the sea, carrying the weight of decades spent guarding secrets. "It wasn't just some accident, Clara. The village, we made a pact. A desperate, terrible pact." Clara leaned forward, the flickering candlelight dancing across her determined face. "With the priest?" she asked softly, her heart pounding. Elias nodded, eyes clouded with sorrow. "Father Malden, he was no ordinary man. The villagers looked to him for salvation as the waters rose, but his faith twisted into something dark. They turned to forbidden rituals, hoping to save themselves, but instead, they damned us all." He traced a brittle finger over a yellowed page, revealing hastily scrawled notes and symbols. The curse wasn't born from the flood itself, but from the fanaticism that led to their drowning. The villagers, in their fear, sacrificed their own souls to bind the waters, to buy time, but it cost them dearly. Clara's mind raced. The altar they found submerged, the strange phenomena, each piece now fit into a terrifying mosaic. So the spirits we see, they're trapped by this pact, bound to the priest and the curse. Elias gave a grim nod. "Yes, and with each resurfacing, the curse reawakens, seeking to punish the living for the sins of the past." Outside, the mist thickened over the skeletal remains of the village, the water seeming to pulse like a heartbeat beneath the ruins. Clara shivered, not from the cold but from the crushing weight of the revelation. "We have to find a way to break it," she said resolutely, "or this cycle will never end." Elias looked at her, a flicker of hope igniting in his tired eyes. "Then we must act quickly. The spirits grow restless, and the priest's influence spreads." As Clara examined the relics Elias had gathered, fragments of incantations and faded prayers, she felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The past was no longer buried beneath the waves. It was clawing its way back to the surface, and their time was running out. Suddenly, a cold draft swept the cabin, carrying with it the faint sound of distant water lapping, a whispered warning from the depths. Clara and Elias exchanged a tense glance. The curse was stirring, and so were the spirits. Their discovery had unleashed a new danger, but also a chance to confront the darkness head-on. The path ahead was fraught with peril, yet Clara's resolve burned brighter than ever. She would uncover every secret, face every ghost, and break the curse that bound the drowned church and its lost village. The night deepened, shadows lengthening as the village outside seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere beneath the waves, the vengeful priest watched, waiting for the next move in a centuries-old game. Clara closed her eyes, steeling herself for the battle to come, knowing that the fate of the restless souls and her own depended on what she would do next. The candle flickered once more, casting eerie shapes on the walls as the secrets of the drowned village whispered through the cabin like the restless tide, relentless and unforgiving. Clara's journey into the heart of the curse had only just begun. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps, the stale, briny air of the drowned church thickening around her, as if the walls themselves exhaled the sorrow of 100 years submerged. She stood at the center of the nave, her boots sinking slightly into the debris-strewn floor where water had long since receded, leaving behind the ghostly remnants of a place once sacred. The moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting fractured beams that shimmered like watery veins across the cracked stone. The silence was a heavy weight, broken only by the faint drip of condensation and the distant, mournful echo of bells that seemed to toll from beneath the earth. A chill crawled along Clara's spine as the shadows shifted, coalescing into forms that flickered like dying flames. Whispers rose like a susurrus from the corners of the church, voices layered with grief and anger, voices that carried the weight of forgotten prayers and broken promises. She clutched her journal tightly, the worn leather cover pressing into her palm, grounding her as the oppressive atmosphere threatened to swallow her whole. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and the air grew heavy with an invisible pressure that squeezed at her chest. Clara stumbled back, nearly losing her footing as a spectral wind swept through the nave, carrying with it the rancid scent of earth and salt. The whispers swelled into a cacophony of despair, voices overlapping in a haunting litany of regret and accusation. Her head spun as she fought to steady her breath, the line between reality and nightmare blurring beneath the weight of the curse. Then, as if summoned by her desperation, a soft glow blossomed near the altar, pale and trembling like a candle struggling against the dark. The light coalesced into a figure swathed in the faded habit of a nun, her features serene yet sorrowful, eyes deep pools of compassion and warning. Sister Agnes. Clara's heart leapt. She had seen the apparition before, fleeting glimpses in her dreams and whispers in her journal, but never so vivid, so close. The ghostly nun raised a hand, her voice a gentle murmur that cut through the turmoil like a bell tolling in the fog. Beware the flood that does not cleanse but consumes. Faith lost is not faith gone, it lingers, waiting for the willing. Her words were cryptic, but laden with meaning. Clara strained to decipher the riddles wrapped in sorrow and hope. Before she could respond, the air convulsed violently as the vengeful priest's spirit surged forth from the shadows, a swirling tempest of water and wrath. His pale, waterlogged form lunged with a fury that chilled Clara's soul. The room seemed to flood with spectral waves, crashing against the fragile barrier between the living and the dead. Panic surged, and Clara felt herself being pulled beneath an invisible tide. But Sister Agnes moved swiftly, stepping between Clara and the malevolent force. Her form radiated a soft, luminescent glow that pushed back the spectral flood, creating a shimmering shield that flickered like light on water. The nun's presence was a balm against the relentless darkness, a testament to a faith that had endured beyond death. "Hold fast, child of the living," Sister Agnes intoned, her voice steady and resolute. "The curse feeds on doubt and despair. Let your heart be the beacon." With a surge of will, Clara gripped her journal and whispered a prayer, words she hadn't spoken aloud in years, words that felt like a lifeline tossed into the storm. The vengeful priest's assault faltered, his form flickering like a candle in the wind, before retreating into the shadows with a final, anguished scream that echoed through the church's hollow bones. Silence fell once more, heavy but less oppressive. Clara sank to her knees, breath ragged but spirit rekindled. The church walls seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if acknowledging the fragile victory. Sister Agnes's figure smiled faintly, a flicker of warmth in her ghostly eyes. "You are not alone," she whispered before fading like mist at dawn. Clara remained kneeling long after the light vanished, the weight of the encounter settling deep within her. The curse was real, yes, but so was hope. The faith that had once bound the village, twisted by betrayal and despair, still lingered in fragments, waiting to be reclaimed. She closed her journal, determination hardening like steel beneath her skin. The darkness was vast and unforgiving, but she had seen a glimpse of salvation, a reminder that even in the deepest depths, where water and faith entwined in a deadly dance, redemption was not beyond reach. As she rose, the distant tolling of the church bells echoed once more, faint and underwater, a haunting melody that promised both ending and beginning. Clara knew the road ahead would be perilous, that the vengeful priest would not relent, and that the spirits of the drowned village still whispered their secrets in the shadows. But now, armed with Sister Agnes's warning and the fragile light of faith, Clara was ready to face the darkness. The curse could be broken, but only if she dared to believe. And deep beneath the waves, the church waited, its secrets rippling like shadows beneath the surface, beckoning her onward. Her journey was far from over. The sun had barely begun its descent when Clara Mallory first noticed the water creeping beyond its usual boundaries. The sunken village had been quiet for hours, the eerie stillness punctuated only by the distant caws of gulls and the faint lap of waves against skeletal buildings. But now the water was rising faster than she expected, its cold fingers lapping greedily at the fractured stone steps leading up to the drowned church. Clara's breath hitched as the tide began to close around her ankles, the murky water swirling with debris from the long-submerged village. She glanced around, heart pounding. The sky was a bruised shade of purple and gray, the wind picking up and carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep through her clothes and settle deep into her bones. Clara pulled her jacket tighter, the fabric damp from earlier explorations, and took a cautious step forward. The water was cold, colder than it should have been for early autumn, and it sent a shiver racing up her spine. Somewhere beneath the surface, shadows moved, shifting and swirling like smoke underwater. "Not now," she whispered, trying to steady her voice. "I'm not ready for this." Her flashlight flickered as she reached the church doors, their ancient wood swollen and cracked from centuries underwater. Clara pushed them open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and rot, mingled with something faintly metallic, old blood, perhaps, or rusted iron. Her footsteps echoed across the flooded floor as the water rose swiftly behind her, spilling into the sanctuary with a hiss. Clara's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she shone her flashlight across the space. The altar was partially submerged, water flowing over its carved edges like a slow-moving river. Around her, the ghostly outlines of the drowned villagers shimmered beneath the water, faces pale and eyes hollow, their mouths opening in silent wails of despair. She swallowed hard, heart hammering in her chest. The spirits were restless tonight, their anguish palpable. A sudden chill swept through the room, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. From the darkest corner of the sanctuary, a pale figure emerged, tattered priest robes clinging to his waterlogged frame, eyes glowing faintly with a cold, otherworldly light. The vengeful priest. "You should not have come back," the spirit intoned, voice echoing like a whisper beneath the waves. "This place is cursed, bound by blood and faith twisted to ruin." Clara swallowed her fear, gripping her journal tightly. "I'm here to end the curse," she said, voice trembling but determined. "To free the souls trapped here." The priest's eyes flared, and the water responded, rising rapidly, swirling around Clara's legs and waist. She fought to keep her balance, the flood threatening to pull her under. The church walls seemed to close in, the ceiling dripping with water that fell like cold tears onto her face. Desperation clawed at her throat as she backed toward the altar, the spectral villagers' faces pressing closer beneath the surface. The priest raised a hand, and the water surged higher, almost to her chin. Clara's mind raced. She had to find a way out, a way to fight back before the water drowned her and the darkness consumed everything. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared beside her. Sister Agnes materialized, ethereal and serene, her faded habit billowing as if underwater. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. "The way lies beneath the altar. Follow me if you wish to live and to break the curse." Clara nodded, swallowing her fear. She dove beneath the rising water, reaching toward the submerged altar's base where a narrow passage revealed itself. The spirits wailed in protest, but Sister Agnes' presence steadied her resolve. With a final glance at the vengeful priest's furious glare, Clara slipped through the passage, the cold darkness enveloping her as the floodwaters rose ever higher above. The battle for the village's soul had begun in earnest, and Clara knew there was no turning back. The cold seeped into Clara's bones as she stepped cautiously into the church's flooded sanctuary. Each footfall disturbed the still water, sending ripples that danced beneath the fractured light filtered through cracked, stained glass windows. The once vibrant colors were now dulled and distorted, casting ghostly hues across the submerged stone floor. The air was thick and heavy, infused with the scent of damp wood, mold, and an undercurrent of something metallic, perhaps old blood or rusted iron. The silence was oppressive, broken only by faint, echoing whispers that seemed to rise from the very depths of the church itself. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself forward, clutching the ancient prayer book close to her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one visible in the cold air. She could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on her, a suffocating presence that turned the very water around her into a threatening force. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, but the determination that had brought her this far refused to waver. As she reached the altar, the temperature dropped further, and the water began to ripple unnaturally. Suddenly, from the shadows, the vengeful priest emerged. His figure was pale and waterlogged, his tattered priest robes clinging like seaweed to his spectral form. His eyes glowed faintly with a cold, otherworldly light, piercing through the gloom like twin beacons of wrath. His voice, when he spoke, was a rasping whisper that seemed to echo from the abyss itself. "You dare to challenge the fate of this village," he hissed, water swirling around him like a living cloak. "The curse is eternal. It binds us all, the lost, the damned." Clara steadied herself, the prayer book trembling in her hands. "No curse is eternal," she replied, voice resolute despite the chill that clutched her heart. "I am here to end your torment, to free the souls trapped in this endless cycle." The priest's form twisted, the water rising swiftly as if summoned by his fury. The sanctuary seemed to groan and shudder beneath the weight of his rage, water swirling into towering waves that threatened to engulf Clara. She felt the cold bite deeper, the floodwaters now chest-high, pressing down on her with crushing intent. In that moment of despair, a soft glow emerged from the altar, a pale, steady light that pushed back against the darkness. Clara clutched the prayer book tighter, beginning to chant the ancient words of forgiveness and sacrifice she had painstakingly researched. Her voice wavered but grew stronger with each phrase, echoing through the watery expanse. The vengeful priest shrieked, his form flickering as the light intensified. The water's fury abated, the waves calming as the spectral figure began to dissolve into mist. Just as his presence faded, a gentle warmth brushed Clara's cheek, and she turned to see Sister Agnes standing silently beside her. The ghostly nun's faded habit shimmered ethereally, her serene face offering a quiet reassurance that steadied Clara's trembling spirit. "Faith is not lost," Sister Agnes whispered, her voice a balm against the lingering dread. "But vigilance must remain." The floodwaters receded slowly, leaving Clara breathless but victorious. The church, once a tomb beneath the waves, now felt sanctified, renewed by sacrifice and hope. Yet, as Clara looked toward the dark waters beyond the stained glass, she knew the curse's shadow still lingered, a silent threat waiting beneath the surface. Her journey was far from over. The vengeful priest's curse had been challenged, but the battle for the village's soul had only just begun.